Today, new dangers face mankind. Dangers which challenge his life, threaten his very existence. Sound frequencies have been found that can penetrate the human brain and destroy life. Deadly isotopes of unknown elements have been discovered that can burn and sear the flesh. Pilotless aircraft crashing the sonic barrier can gain complete mastery over the skies. To meet this challenge to our existence, a new agency has been formed.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Common Anomaly Podcast. I'm your host, Stuart James. Joining me today, Clayton James. On today's episode, we're tearing apart the beast of a story that is the Montauk Project. How's it going, brother?
It's going good. I think this is going to be quite the episode.
Yes, this is a big one. It's a fun one. It's one I've wanted to do for sure since starting this, but to be honest, I have to say this one intimidates me a little bit. It's a big story.
Yeah, I spent all week trying to make some kind of sense out of this story, and I don't know how well I did, but
it's got a little bit of everything, doesn't it? It's got what has it got? Time travel.
It's got secret government agencies. It's got psychic spies. It's got mind control. It's got time travel. It's got zombies.
It's got monsters.
It's got a couple of monsters.
Government conspiracies. Just about anything you can think of. It's going to connect somewhere.
Yeah, I think pretty much everything we've talked about thus far on the show somehow connects to the Montauk Project.
That's right. It's going to be fun. It might be a little bit all over the map, but I think it's going to be a fun journey. But just before we dive into the meat of it here, we've been trying to do shout-outs, and I don't have a specific listener to shout out today. But I did want to do a shout out today just to our friends across the pond in the UK. In the past couple of weeks, we've been getting a lot of downloads over in the United Kingdom. I don't know who those people are, but they seem to be enjoying the show, and they're telling their friends, because I keep seeing new locations pop up on our little map that shows us where folks are listening from. And it's really great to see. So just hello over there really to our listeners over in the UK. Thanks for listening. Yeah, do you have any shout outs? Anybody you want to say hi to before we get going?
I just want to thank Susie once again, because I was really struggling to make sense of this episode, so I kind of read through my notes with her last night.
Oh, you forced her to help you practice.
Does this make sense? Does this make any kind of sense?
Yeah. Well, it's a huge knot. I'll give you that, but we'll do our best to untie it. Let's get into it. Do you want to get the ball rolling, since you've at least had the advantage of practicing once?
No, I think you ought to get this one started.
Okay, put me on the spot, eh?
Yeah, you do it to me all the time.
All right. For me, I would say the central character in this whole mess has got to be Preston Nichols. A character called Preston Nichols. He wrote the original book disclosing the conspiracy of the Montauk Chronicles back in 1992. And so he's an electrical engineer. Mm-hmm. He's kind of like this wacky inventor type, builds a lot of strange devices that can do crazy things. And at some point, he kind of awoke to the idea that he had been living a double life. That he, aside from being an engineer, was the director and central figure in this conspiracy called the Montauk Project, which was based out of Camp Hero in Montauk, Long Island.
Yeah.
Or it's in the state of New York on Long Island. It's the farthest, I guess, northeastern tip of Long Island.
Yeah, it's you're almost at the end of Long Island, and it's just northeast of the town of Montauk.
Yeah. And so there's what is now a defunct Air Force base there.
Yeah, that base was originally built during World War II. It was basically a coastal defense base.
Yeah, and it's disguised as a fishing village.
Yeah, they had these two really big, guns pointed out to sea.
Yep.
A radar tower, and they disguised everything,
Yeah.
as a fishing village.
And I believe at one point in time, this was the most powerful radar transmitter in the world.
Yeah. So after World War II, like the really big dish
Yeah.
was built there after World War II, and that was part of an early detection radar.
Yeah.
And it was part of this whole network of similar installations that were basically detect incoming Soviet bombers
That's right.
during the Cold War.
That's right. Yeah. And so there's a lot of mystique around Camp Hero, and there's a lot of kind of legends and stories, even before Preston Nichols came out with his book about the Montauk Project, that there was very interesting, secretive, strange things going on at this base.
Yeah. It became kind of a local legend in the area that something weird was going on at this base. There was something secretive going on at this base, and a lot of anomalous stuff happening in the area. Whenever there was a lot of activity on the base, there would be these magnetic anomalies. They'd interfere with technology. They'd interfere with radio and television signals. Animals would start behaving strangely.
Yeah.
Even people would just randomly fall into a trance and be unresponsive.
Yeah. So there was maybe some secret programs going on, maybe some secret weapons development of different kinds. We don't really know. But in 1992, Preston Nichols came out with this book, and what he says was going on is that there was secret psychic programs and mind control programs going on in a facility underneath Camp Hero, where they were experimenting on young boys, torturing them, trying to break their minds, and basically making like Manchurian Candidate.
Yeah, psychic spies.
Sleeper assassins, sleeper cells, where people would go under very intense psychological manipulation and mind control, and they wouldn't even realize that they were programmed in this way, and then they could be triggered to carry out an assassination or a terrorist attack or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that he was involved in this program, was the director of a lot of the activities that happened there. But then he also had stories of programs of them working on secret technologies for time travel.
So,
and building portals to other dimensions.
Let's rewind just like a little bit. How did he discover that he had these repressed memories of leading this double life as the director of this program?
Well, maybe you can help fill in the gaps on that.
Oh, I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked.
I can see your eyes beaming. Like, I was like, why did you ask me the question if you've got the answer in your brain?
You always ask the questions. I thought I was
That's because I know you have the answers. I'm the question guy.
Okay, I won't ask any more questions.
Okay, please fill us in. How did Preston, our friend Preston here, awaken to his double life?
He basically just people would start coming up to him, people he didn't know, and they would start talking to him. He'd be at work, and he was all of a sudden invited to meetings that he had no idea what was going on, and people just started talking to him as if they knew this alter ego. Yeah, I forget the name of the fellow he ran into that basically described to him like, yeah, I know you. We worked on the base together. You were my boss.
Yeah, wasn't that, if that's the story I'm thinking of, wasn't that Duncan Cameron?
Duncan Cameron.
Yeah, it
was either Duncan Cameron or Al Bielek.
Yeah, one of the two. And I think it was Duncan Cameron who was the time traveler, right? Involved with the Philadelphia experiment.
Oh, they were both time travelers.
Oh, there's both of them, right?
Both of them were time travelers.
Okay.
See, Duncan Cameron they were both time travelers, and Duncan Cameron was the one who got his consciousness moved into another body.
Right.
Because he couldn't survive the time travel, and he started aging really rapidly.
Okay, so that's a really fun story, and I guess that is
jumping ahead a bit.
Yeah, we're jumping all over the map, which I'm sure we will. But why don't we talk about the Philadelphia experiment? Because in some ways, that could be looked at as the true beginning of all of this.
Okay, so the Philadelphia experiment. we'll begin in Philadelphia,
Yep.
obviously. October 28th, 1943. Officially, the U.S. military was trying to develop stealth technology.
Yeah. For naval vessels.
Yes, basically to make them invisible to radar. Officially. Unofficially, in theory, what they were actually doing is they weren't just trying to make a ship invisible to radars. They were trying to make a ship physically, optically invisible, like to the eye. Like, think the cloaking device, the Romulans
like
and
a
Klingons
real
had in Star
cloaking
Trek.
device, yeah.
They were trying to develop something like that.
So a critical experiment was being conducted.
Yeah, and they had recruited none other than Albert Einstein to help them develop this. And on the day of the test, they tested it on a ship called the USS Eldridge.
Yep.
When the equipment was powered up, the ship vanished. They initially thought, it was a success.
Yeah.
But the ship was actually gone. It wasn't just invisible.
Well,
it had disappeared.
The version I've heard is that initially it did disappear optically. Aside, you could see the imprint in the water of the hull, where the hull went down into the water. But then at some point, it disappeared completely.
Yeah. And then
it appeared at another port, hundreds of miles away.
It reappeared in Norfolk, Virginia.
Yeah.
And it was there for just a few moments, and then disappeared again.
Snapped back.
Reappeared at its starting point. And when it reappeared, the crew of the ship, when the ship, rematerialized, the crew were all kind of embedded in the hull and had all died horribly, basically.
Or have gone mad. But horribly disfigured or turned inside out or what have you. So obviously, whatever physical processes were involved in making the ship invisible and, I guess, teleport hundreds of miles away was not compatible to the biological people on board the ship. Horrible disaster. That's a really fun story in these circles. You can take it with a grain of salt. That's probably a whole other episode debating whether you can take that to the bank or not, or whether we believe this tale or not. But the story of Al Bielek and Duncan Cameron is that they were aboard the USS Eldridge.
Yeah, they were aboard. They're brothers. Al Bielek was actually born Edward Cameron.
Right. Yes.
He changed his name after this incident, but they were both crew members on the USS Eldridge. And when the experiment started, when they got a sense things were not kind of going according to plan, that they were in some danger, they both jumped overboard.
Right. Yeah.
To save themselves, only to get sucked into this time tunnel.
Yeah.
And reemerge in the 1980s.
Yeah.
At a base called Camp Hero.
Camp Hero.
Where this project called Montauk was going on.
Right. And then they got recruited into it. And so then there's these time-traveling super soldier from the past, psychic.
Well, Duncan Cameron's the
spies.
Super soldier.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, aside reemerging in the 80s, they also did, some more time traveling after that. I think Duncan Cameron went through another time tunnel, emerged in the year 2140, I think.
Yeah, that's right. I've got the whole path here. Yeah. First, it was 2137.
Okay, I was close.
That they went to. And then from there, they jumped to 2749, and then back to 1983. And there's, I don't have it all written out in my notes, but there's kind of a fun stories about what the world looked like.
Yeah, he was describing like floating cities. And
that's right. Well, that's 2749. But in 2137, it's like the world had just been through a major nuclear war. Mm-hmm. Most of North America was destroyed. It was martial law everywhere. The entire geography of the world had changed. California had flooded or sunk into the ocean and was now just an island chain. All the Great Lakes had merged into one. And it was kind of very much like a dark ages because I think the world population had dropped to like 300 million or something
cheapers.
because of this massive war between you can probably guess
the US and China.
The US, China, Russia.
Yeah.
So that's 2137, and then he continued down his time tunnel journey to 2749, where the world had recovered from that phase. Obviously, it's like 800 years later, almost. And there's floating cities. AI controls everything.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
The world government is just controlled by AI, and nobody had jobs. All your needs were looked after, so long as you contributed. But people had lost a great deal of their individuality and their freedom. They're basically kind of cyborg zombies.
That sounds less nice.
Enslaved to the system, but well kept. But kind of like the world had moved into this kind of very conformed, like one organism, or a collective,
like the Borg,
a lot like the Borg. And then after that was 1983, and they're in the middle, find themselves in the middle of the Montauk Project. I'm glad I could remember all that. I'm amazed I could remember that.
That's impressive.
Usually when I'm if I don't, I always do this when I'm researching the show, where I kind of get sucked away into a story and forget to make notes. And I'm telling myself, I'll remember. And you can never freaking remember the moment you actually need to, which is when we're recording. But for once I did. But anyway, you were on a path.
I was?
Yeah, were you not? You're not going somewhere? Or did we get sucked into our own time tunnel?
I think we got sucked into a time tunnel. Anyway, well, let's talk about this actual project, the Montauk Project.
Yeah.
You had talked about, mind control, like psychological conditioning. So what they were basically trying to do, because all of this sounds a lot like MK Ultra.
Yeah.
Creating mind-controlled operatives, basically.
Yep.
And all of this is very much connected to MK Ultra. I actually have a bunch of notes on MK Ultra. I've got a bunch of notes on Project Monarch. I've got a bunch of notes on Project Artichoke. Because they are all connected. Basically,
I've heard of Artichoke and I've heard of Monarch, but I have to say of those two, I don't actually know much about either of them. MK Ultra, I'm really familiar with. But
yeah, I mean, we're all familiar with MK Ultra because that story came out in a Senate committee. Mm-hmm. A United States Senate committee in 1975 called the Church Committee.
Yeah.
Headed up by Frank Church, who was a senator from Idaho. And basically it was an ongoing investigation into abuses by American intelligence agencies. Mm-hmm. And all this stuff came to light, plans to carry out assassinations, experimentation with mind control, usually on completely unwitting participants.
Which is a major human rights violation. This is a huge scandal. And this is all, and that's like the MK Ultra stuff, that's verified. It's all admitted. Real world.
The U.S. government made a big deal of apologizing for it. Bill Clinton gave this big apology for it back in the 90s. But with MK Ultra especially, when these various intelligence agencies realized they were being investigated, so many documents were destroyed. Most of the documents tied to MK Ultra and anything associated with MK Ultra
shredding parties happening
have been destroyed.
Yeah.
So, very little is actually very specifically admitted.
Yeah.
But the stuff that is admitted is particularly damning.
Yeah.
Basically like techniques like psychic driving or forced drug use. They would give people LSD.
Or non-consensual drug use, like they're dosing people without their knowledge.
Yeah. Medically inducing a coma and basically trying to brainwash people by playing it like a looped audio over and over and over again. And it was all attempt to break down a person's personality.
Yeah.
So they could build a new personality. And they would have an operative that they can control. All that is admitted. It sounds crazy, but all of this has been documented, admitted, apologized for. But there's all this...
And it's thought that Project Montauk could have just been either a piece of that kind of larger tapestry or an extension of those programs.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds so crazy that something like that was admitted. And, all these other projects I just referenced, like Project Artichoke was basically a precursor to MK Ultra. an attempt to create an assassin through the use of brainwashing and mind control.
Yeah.
Because they thought the Soviets were doing similar things too, and they're like, well, we need to get ahead of the Soviets on this. And there's actually a quote here I got on Project Artichoke. This is actually from a government document on Project Artichoke.
Yeah.
Can we get control of an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will and even against fundamental laws of nature, such as self-preservation? And that was the idea. Basically create an assassin that isn't worried about, coming back home.
Yeah.
Could do a lot of damage that way.
And they're basically that person is at that point, they're acting against their will and volition. They're they're carrying out whatever their mission is, but they have no control. So they're being manipulated. It's a violation of that person's human rights.
Yeah. But anyway, I digress. Montauk, specifically, according to our friend Preston Nichols, what that was, offshoot of MK Ultra, and what they were trying to do, they weren't trying to create necessarily a mind-controlled assassin or anything like that. They were trying to use these techniques, this torture, this forced drug use, basically to amplify people's psychic abilities because they were trying to create psychic super soldiers.
Yeah. One, can we talk about the chair, the Montauk chair?
Yes, I'm getting to the chair.
Okay.
I'm getting to the chair. And basically, they had this device called the Montauk chair, which is basically like the heart of the project.
Yeah.
If you think like the X-Men,
I wanted to do that. Yes, it's Cerebro.
When Professor X sits down and he puts that Cerebro device on his head, and it magnifies his psychic abilities like tenfold.
Did you read my notes when I was in the bathroom?
No. I got my own notes.
Stole my Cerebro notes.
So basically, the Montauk chair, they had these psychic super soldiers, and when they sat down in this chair, it would amplify their innate psychic abilities to the point where they could project.
Yeah, and they had a whole protocol for it.
Worldwide.
Yeah, and they had this technique called the seeing eye, where it's like if you were sitting in this chair and you had been properly conditioned, air quotes I'm going to say, through their programming, say the person sitting in that chair, you could be, say they hand you a lock of someone's hair, and then you go into trance and you'll be able to see through that person's eyes, and you could do covert surveillance. It's basically remote viewing, right?
Yeah.
But the whole point of it is to amp up those kind of innate human abilities and see if they can use it for international espionage or terrorism or what have you. Yeah, but I thought that was really cool. That was a really cool connection.
And it's interesting you bring up the chair, because this Montauk chair device was because you always have these little things on the table while we're doing the show. Yeah. These little pyramid things. They're called what did you call them?
Orgone generators.
Orgone generators. This whole concept of orgone energy was created by a man named Wilhelm Reich. Okay. Controversial figure. He was a student of Sigmund Freud. He was a psychologist and a philosopher. He was part of Freud's inner circle, actually. He was kind of eventually shunned from that inner circle because he was a bit extreme, even for a character like Sigmund Freud.
He was a little radical.
But he had this idea of orgone energy, which is kind of like this energy emitted by all life forms that binds the galaxy. It kind of sounds like the Force from Star Wars. Yeah. It's basically the same concept. Now, Wilhelm Reich, he kind of got this idea from Sumerian mythology. Right. Ancient Sumerians, they had this idea of a force they called it May. And it was basically like an energy field emitted by all living things that could be harnessed to heal, to manifest. It was what bound reality together. Yeah. And that's where he got this idea. I just thought it was fascinating that connection to ancient Sumerian mythology.
Yeah, well, and it sounds a lot like the kind of electric universe stuff they were talking a couple episodes back in the ether,
But anyway, Wilhelm Reich, he got into creating inventions that were based on this orgone energy.
Right.
that he theorized. He made these devices called cloudbusters.
Right.
And they were these really big steampunk-looking devices with these metal tubes. He'd point up at the sky, and he claimed he could control the weather with them. Built a device called an orgone accumulator, which was it was basically like a tiny little booth you could sit in, and it could supposedly heal any disease. It could even cure cancer, supposedly.
Oh, was any of that tested and verified?
Depends what you mean by verified. A lot of people looked at it and found his results, quote, fascinating.
Okay.
Actually, Albert Einstein is even quoted as
It's funny.
taking a look at one of these and saying it was interesting.
Huh. Okay. It's funny you mentioned weather modification, if I could just steal your thought for a moment.
Oh, yeah.
Because, in my research, I came across a story about Preston Nichols and a woman, I forget who, but was investigating his story. Mm-hmm. And he produced a device that he claimed he could alter the weather, even in an enclosed room that they're standing in. And he pushed some buttons and twisted some dials, and all of a sudden the temperature in the room dropped like 20 degrees, and frost started appearing on the window. And this woman supposedly came away a believer. That's just a story, secondhand. Again, I don't have the exact precise details on that, but a fun story about Preston Nichols.
Yeah.
Maybe utilizing orgone technology.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry.
Yeah. So these little things we have on the desk, orgone generators, you call them. So basically, that's the principle. It's like layers of different material.
Yeah.
Layers of different minerals and like organic material. There's some kind of like metallic.
Yeah, there's a copper coil.
Yeah,
there's a copper coil around a quartz crystal at the center, embedded, and looks kind of like gold or pyrite, and then maybe some obsidian. It looks really cool.
Yeah.
Actually.
So the idea is that it draws in and concentrates this orgone energy that is kind of innately all around us.
Yeah.
The Montauk chair was supposedly powered by orgone accumulators. That's what powered it. That's what gave it the ability to amplify psychic abilities and project it worldwide.
Yeah.
Basically how you look at it is they kind of took Wilhelm Reich's ideas and his work, and they weaponized it.
Yeah.
Where Wilhelm Reich's devices were kind of designed to heal, this was designed as a weapon. And it's actually interesting because what ended up happening to Wilhelm Reich is the government seized all his work and destroyed it. All his published work, all his books, they were burned. Yeah. All his prototypes of his inventions, they were all seized by the U.S. government. Granted, he didn't really do himself any favors. So he got into some trouble with the FDA because he was making some medical claims about his devices.
Yeah.
The FDA didn't like that. Then he went ahead and continued selling them and making medical claims anyway. And he ended up going to court for it. He actually went to jail for being in contempt of court when he kind of stood up in court and said, no earthly court can be my judge.
Right.
The guy didn't do himself any favors.
Yeah.
So he ended up dying in prison.
Oh, that's a shame.
He had a son named Peter Reich who actually helped him construct these inventions, and he wrote a memoir later on. Interesting little side note, Peter Reich's memoir telling the story about his father and building these devices with his father, and how the government came and took everything and destroyed it. It was actually that story was actually adapted into the lyrics of a song by Kate Bush. It's called Cloudbusters, and it's interesting that name Kate Bush because she became like pop star from the 80s. Yeah. But she became kind of well known again more recently. Because,
retroactively popular.
Yeah. Another one of her songs was used in the soundtrack to season 2 of Stranger Things.
Yeah.
And if this whole story about the Montauk Project sounds familiar,
it's because that's what the Stranger Things was based on.
Yeah. The Stranger Things, though, that whole television show is just a loose adaptation.
And I believe it was the documentary, The Montauk Chronicles, and I believe the documentarian's name, or the filmmaker's name, is Christopher Garetano. I apologize.
Sounds right.
I apologize if I got that wrong. I'm pretty sure it's Gaetano. And yeah, it was the producers saw that documentary, and that's directly what inspired the creation of Stranger Things. Stranger Things actually had a working title called just Montauk.
Yeah, yeah.
So basically what you're saying is everything that happens on the Stranger Things television show happened in real life. That's what you're telling me.
I actually wouldn't know. I watched like part of the first season. I didn't.
Oh, you've not watched all of it?
I didn't really get
very
into
you should. It. I actually really enjoyed it.
I liked it. It just, I don't know. Maybe it just, I didn't watch it at the right time. It didn't really grab me the way it seemed to grab everyone else.
Yeah.
So I've
maybe
part of the first season.
after this you'll be inspired to go and check it out again, and you can rediscover it. It's been a long time since I watched it.
After trying to decipher this story all week, I'm ready for like a break from this story after we're done this episode.
It's too much.
This I need to think about something else for a while, because this story gets really wild.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's funny. Like I was watching some of the Montauk Chronicles, and it follows. It's interesting. The way it's formatted is really interesting film. I mean, you can find it on YouTube. Mm-hmm. So I'll maybe link to it in the show notes so people know where to find it. But it tracks through several of these unfortunate participants, unwilling participants in the Montauk Project. These young boys that were, I guess, kidnapped, taken off the streets from all over the United States, and put into this program, tortured, given drugs, in an effort to break their minds and be part of this program. And so a lot of what the documentary does is follow these folks that have come to realize a lot through hypnotic regression, mm-hmm. becoming aware that they were involved in this program somehow. Mm-hmm. And so I want to be careful how I address this, because I think this could be a little bit of a trigger warning for people. It goes kind of to a dark place.
Yeah, I will say that this story, the more popular it has become, and I mean the same with any story, the more popular it becomes, especially a story of this nature, the more actual crazy people it will attract.
I have to say, watching it, I definitely started to have my doubts. Not that there's zero truth to this, but and just being able to kind of witness and hear the stories of some victims firsthand. And Preston Nichols, his strategy for determining, because basically he puts them on a special bed and they do more or less a normal hypnotic regression, but Preston Nichols does a thing called psychic scanning, where basically he puts his hand out like Yoda in Star Wars, mm-hmm. while this person is going through their hypnotic regression, and scans them, and he got his eyes closed, and he puts his a hand to his temple and a hand reaching out into the air.
Well,
and
I mean, we've
psychically
already,
scanning this person.
We've already established that this was this also inspired Star Wars.
Yeah. And he just at the end of it confirms what I feel like that person was waiting to hear, which is like, yes, you're definitely a Montauk boy. You were involved in this. That becomes integrated into that person's identity going forward. Yeah. So I definitely felt like, okay, I've got some doubts creeping in. Not necessarily that none of this happened, but definitely I don't feel like, especially learning about some of the other characters involved that also claim to have been involved in this project in one way or another, that you start to get some, like you said, the crazies come out and you get more and more dubious characters, and the story just continues to get new branches, new tendrils, and get wilder and wilder as it expands, right? And to me, it's like, what did we say when we were talking about Bob Lazar? What struck us so about Bob Lazar's story, and
he was consistent.
That lent him credibility. It was consistent. 30 years later or 40 years later, his story hasn't changed, hasn't evolved dramatically. Where this is a tale that we keep adding chapters. Yeah. And they get crazier and crazier as you go along. So I feel like there's probably a root of truth.
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
this story.
Well, like I said, MK Ultra, that happened.
Yeah,
Project
absolutely.
Artichoke. It happened.
And there are a lot of strange things. And I've in some of the other research I was doing, just seeing investigators, watching other documentaries, go to the town of Montauk, talk to the people that live there, and the stories they told. I think it was Chris Garetano interviewing a couple that he just met in Montauk, and they related a story to him of back in the 70s and early 80s when this program was running, that there would be these government trucks or these military vehicles that would go through the town of Montauk, spraying some kind of weird chemical all over, just through the neighborhoods, through the residential areas of the town. And then half an hour later, you'd see the radar dish spark up.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, people, like you mentioned, would go into trances.
Yeah.
And it's like everyone in the town kind of went zombified, and stories like that, right?
Yeah.
And so it's speculated that, yeah, maybe the entire town was being used as an experiment for God knows what kind of off-the-books rogue intelligence infrastructure projects, right?
Yeah.
On that, do you mind if I uncover my juicy little nugget I found?
Oh, please.
So I've got a really awesome little audio clip I want to play for you. So I found this via a YouTube channel called Montauk is Strange. I'll leave a link in the show notes. And so this channel is entirely devoted to the town of Montauk and the strange things that go on there. And I came across one of their videos where they were in Montauk and trying to investigate the town, something else entirely, and they just stumble across a reel-to-reel, an old reel-to-reel on the side of the road, like just in the bushes, off on the side of a road, an old, like 1980s style audio reel.
Neat.
And it was all caked in mud and rusty, like it'd been sitting out for a long time. There's no label on it, right? If there were a label at any point, it was long weathered away.
Okay.
And it was in really rough shape. And so they went about trying to, they picked it up, retrieved it, and they went about trying to restore it and see if they could get any audio off of this. And this is just a random reel-to-reel they found on the side of the road near Montauk.
Near Montauk. Okay.
So, and they were successful in getting about a minute's worth of audio. There's more. They haven't fully restored it. And I watched for updates. They developed this. They're trying to get more of the audio recovered.
Okay.
But it's proven challenging. But I've got about a minute of audio that I'd like to play for you now and get your reaction to what you're hearing.
All right, let's hear it.
Doesn't sound like it sounds decades before these reels. I mean, it sounds very old-fashioned. Like 20s or something. I don't know.
So, what do you make of that?
That's really creepy.
Really creepy,
But
isn't it?
You know what it reminded me of?
What?
Have you ever listened to an album by an artist called The Caretaker?
No.
Called Everywhere at the End of Time?
No, never heard of it.
So basically the album, it's kind of like this very experimental concept album. You have to have a lot of patience to listen to this because it's 6 hours long. But it's one of the saddest pieces of music I've ever heard. It was basically meant as an audio representation of the experience of your mind slowly degrading from Alzheimer's.
Right.
And the album starts with this kind of like jaunty 1920s era music.
Yeah, a lot like we just heard.
Yeah, and as the album progresses, it slowly becomes more degraded and distorted and just upsetting sounding.
Yeah, just like that. Well, the thing that struck me is like, well, you can hear voices, or you can hear a voice. It's hard to tell whether it's one voice or multiple voice, but it's hard to make out. So it kind of forces you to strain your ear.
Yeah, yeah.
And it sounds like some pieces are maybe layered and reversed. And then all of a sudden, I don't know if you caught it, but there's two little clips that suddenly break through really clear, where you hear the voice say, "Get me out." Mm-hmm. And then again, a little later, saying, "Give your blood." It just spooked me out, man.
Yeah.
Like, what is this? What is this? And why is it just lying on the side of the road in Montauk?
And remember what I said about MK Ultra? They would use a technique called psychic driving.
Yeah.
Where they'd basically, they'd make you listen to this looped audio of some kind over and over and over for sometimes days at a time.
Yeah. It's a method of
even
torture.
As you slept.
Yeah.
As a form of torture and also as a form of conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
What that audio was, who knows? Maybe it was 1920s music in this case.
And there's other stuff. There's other weird things. Again, just Montauk is a strange place. And one of the investigations I was watching earlier this week, there's like some abandoned homes, right on the military base, and some, like all the paint on the wall, or they're all painted, like each room is painted in different, like crazy psychedelic patterns. Mm-hmm. Or whatever, but very deliberately so and professionally. And it's not just like graffiti, right? Because you can see that, outlets had been taped over properly. Mm-hmm. And so it was, it was intentionally done. It's not just graffiti because it's been abandoned and someone's done this. And so was this home used as a laboratory where people kept there and forced to listen to strange music and use these psychic driving techniques, force drugs in order to break them down?
So right now, Montauk or Camp Hero in its current state, you don't know what happened back there back in the day. The place was decommissioned in the 80s.
Yeah.
And so much of it was below ground. They had all this like underground infrastructure. It's all been filled with cement.
Yeah.
It's all been sealed off. So you don't know what's down there.
Yeah. Well, there's not supposed to be anything down there. That's part of the reason these conspiracies exist, is because the official line is there are no underground structures anywhere near the Montauk
But there's
Air Force
entrances,
base.
there's hatches,
yeah,
there's doorways.
they're clearly been paved over and
Yeah.
sealed. Yeah, so those entryways are there. And some of the stuff I found, I think it was Chris Gaetano. I really hope I'm saying his name correctly. Found a guy who had like old handycam video from the 1990s before it all been completely paved over. Mm-hmm. Some of these entrances. They explored some of these rooms. So there's direct proof evidence that there are underground structures beneath the Montauk Air Force Base. But officially, there are none. So that raises an eyebrow, right?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the monster?
Which one?
The one that's the reason this place was supposedly shut
defunct?
down and decommissioned.
The scary monster.
The beast,
yeah,
as they call it.
Yeah, please. Let's go into it. Tell me about the beast.
Why was the Montauk project shut down, supposedly? Well, we come back to our friend Duncan Cameron.
Yes.
You remember Duncan Cameron?
Sure do.
He became one of the project's most gifted psychic assets.
Okay.
And he was the one they'd often get to sit in the Montauk chair. And it came to the point where they discovered he could even just make objects materialize with his mind.
Yeah.
He could summon them into existence whole cloth or teleport them from a parallel dimension.
Yeah. And that you see that in poltergeist phenomenon, where things just kind of port out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like coins or things will just drop from the ceiling out of nowhere.
There's a story of him making an entire house materialize.
Oh yeah,
just outside the base,
like David Blaine.
Yeah. Anyway, what eventually happened is, oopsies. He summons a monster.
Oh dear.
He makes a monster materialize inside the base, and it starts rampaging through the base and attacking everybody
there. In sight, causing chaos.
So this monster is described as being 12 to 14 feet tall, and apparently fed on people's terror, and the more fear it absorbed, the larger it would get.
Wow.
And also the more solid it became, because when the monster first materialized, it's described as being like kind of translucent and kind of changing in shape. Like it was kind of glitching in and out of existence.
Right, like it wasn't fully formed.
Like the monster is trying to exist. It's trying to break into our dimension. So the more terror it absorbed, the bigger and more solid it became. But it's basically described as, like you said, kind of Bigfoot looking. But its mouth is described as a vertical lamprey like maw with concentric rings of needle-like teeth. And from this mouth, it emitted infrasound.
Oh.
We talked about infrasound
actually, that
before.
sounds like a very good description of the monster from Stranger Things.
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. Yeah, it was kind of, during its rampage, it was kind of changing shape, and it was kind of phasing in and out. But as time went on, it was becoming larger and larger and more solid. And they found the only way to get rid of this monster was to cut all the power, shut down the Montauk chair.
Yeah.
Shut it all down. They had to cut the power and start destroying all their equipment.
And did that work?
And that made the monster just evaporate, basically.
Oh.
But after that, that's when the project is shut down, everything's sealed off, and they start sealing off all this.
That's what did it, hey? Just one bad, rogue Bigfoot on the loose, and they shut everything down. That seems a little...
Just one monster.
For such a crazy program doing so many crazy things,
So hypothetically, this monster is feeding on fear.
Yeah.
And it's slowly growing larger and larger and also more solid.
Yeah.
So you probably have a limited window of even being able to get rid of it at all.
Right. Yeah.
Like how big was this thing going to get?
Got rid of it.
Is it going to become like King Kong size?
Is it even really gone, or is it just, on to kind of bring it into Stranger Things language? Is he on the other side? Just in that dimension right next to ours, trying to get back in, even today.
Well, it's a good thing they just filled that whole complex with cement.
Okay, so you think that was like a necessary... They needed to patch and shut down. So do you think they just moved it? Did they move operations to somewhere else? Maybe decided they ripped the fabric of reality there at Montauk, and they just needed to move operations to somewhere where the veil hadn't been worn so thin. Well, like, what is it? The laboratory, Brookhaven.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing with a project like this, because... like I said, this is very much like MK Ultra offshoot stuff. Remember, I was saying so much of the documentation with MK Ultra was destroyed. There's very little actual documentation on MK Ultra, but what's there is damning.
Yeah,
and there's nothing specific admitted by anyone about. And I was just thinking, like before we started this episode, like. This project seems like such a convergence of like so many different things we've talked about. Everything kind of intersects at Montauk. But you look at Montauk itself, that is probably just one node in a much bigger project. There's probably similar bases.
Right.
Here,
doing
there,
similar types of work. Yeah.
everywhere. I actually want to tell like a really fascinating story
Okay.
because I promised you I had something surprising.
Yeah, that's right. You had a surprise. Yeah.
Because I was on this train of thought. Like Montauk, it's got to be just one node in a much bigger network.
Yeah.
So I wanted to see, are there any other places in the world similar to this, similar stories?
Mm-hmm.
And I actually found one right here in Canada, where they conducted MK Ultra experiments. In Montreal, there was a mental institution called the Allen Memorial Institute. And between 1957 and 1964, with funding and at the behest of the CIA, this mental institution in Montreal conducted experiments for MK Ultra. The people would check into this hospital for depression, for anxiety, for schizophrenia, for all sorts of different reasons. And they were experimented on. They were subjected to electroshock treatments, drug-induced comas. They were given LSD against their will. They used psychic driving on them.
Right.
And, this is very documented. Stated reason is to experiment and find ways to break down the personality and brainwash people, basically. Yeah. And the Canadian government has never officially acknowledged its role in MK Ultra. There was no apology ever made by the Canadian government.
Right.
The larger federal government officially never had anything to do with MK Ultra. It was just this one institute.
Yeah.
Officially. But even as late as 2017, the Trudeau government was actually paying out-of-court settlements to survivors of this institute.
Really?
And their children.
Wow.
But they were also making them sign non-disclosure agreements.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
So this hasn't gotten
public attention.
As much attention as it warrants. I'm going to send you like an article from the CBC that goes into this. And I want to be, that's all documented. But I want to be kind of sensitive to, this is an actual thing that happened, and the victims of it deserve to have what happened to them remembered.
Recognized, yeah.
And recognized, and hopefully someday apologized for.
Yeah.
But this actually kind of led me down a very speculative rabbit hole. But I do want to be respectful of the Allen Memorial Institute. This happened. It was real. And
real victims.
It doesn't get enough attention.
Yeah. Well, and sorry to interject right in the middle of your thought, as I'm always doing. Sorry, I'll try and stop that. But yeah, it's exactly the sort of thing that our society is not supposed to be doing. Nuremberg. This isn't things our governments are not supposed to be engaged in.
But that Cold War mentality, there's an enemy out there. We have to fight them. And people are capable of such horrible things when they think it's justified.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm getting to.
Convince themselves it's justified.
You can justify anything though, right? That's why we created laws and human rights and things to prevent people from going down those roads. Yeah. So anyway, sorry. Please continue.
But that being said, this led me down a very speculative rabbit hole because I want to see I know the Canadian government is not admitting to anything. I mean, the American government admits to very little of what actually happened.
Yeah.
They admit up to the point where the documents end because all the documents were destroyed.
And only because they got cornered.
And they will never specifically admit to anything beyond that. Yeah. And neither will the Canadian government. But that got me kind of searching. Like, this had to have gone farther than just this one location in Canada.
Yeah.
So this is where it gets a bit speculative because there's no documents, but there's rumors. Mm-hmm. And some of these rumors come from survivors of the Allen Memorial Institute. That points to another location. So at the Allen Memorial Institute, they had people that apparently they would call inconclusive assets. And basically, these were patients. They were too far gone. They were too damaged to be reintegrated into society.
Right.
But as research subjects, they still held some value. And the rumors were that these people were shipped to another facility somewhere out west in Alberta. This part, I hope you're wearing your shitting pants, because this is going to make you shit your pants.
Okay, I'm ready.
So
we're getting closer and closer to home here. So hit me with it.
There are descriptions, kind of vague descriptions of this place out west in Alberta that these inconclusive assets were sent. They describe a place surrounded by mountains and forest and hydroelectric dams. And the name that is frequently mentioned is CB Alberta.
CB?
CB Alberta.
Oh. Well, shit.
Interesting fact about CB Alberta, it is known for magnetic anomalies. That whole area is known for magnetic anomalies, just like Montauk. Also exists on a known ley line.
Right.
Just like Montauk.
Yeah.
And the indigenous people of the area tell tales of this giant shape-shifting monster that stalks the woods called the Botha or Howler.
Right.
We talked about it a few episodes ago.
Yeah. Well, we've got time travel involved. Like, did they really get rid of that monster, or did they just teleport it back in time the same way that Duncan Cameron went forwards through time? And
again, this is all very speculative. This is all just rumor. But you got to think
that's a crazy connection, though.
CB Alberta as a government black site kind of makes sense because it has a history of a POW camp in World War II.
That's right.
And they actually had some surviving infrastructure from that. You know, there is actually one or two buildings from the POW camp that are still standing today. And what did I say when I was researching CB? You know, I didn't say it on air, but when I was talking to you about it before and after the show, I said I don't think CB is. We were talking about it during our ghost hunting episode. I said I don't think CB is haunted by your standard ghosts. I think something like eldritch and Lovecraftian.
Yeah.
Some kind of entity, because people are reporting, the waters look weird. Light doesn't reflect off them properly. The waters are running backwards. People describe going into abandoned buildings with no electricity, but the clocks are all still running, but they're running 1 minute out of sync. And they're walking around, and it seems like buildings are
just like reality is fractured somehow in this location. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, okay.
So CB Alberta that does have black site.
Yeah, that does have me shitting my pants a little bit. And that's crazy, that connection to our story. If you're a new listener or haven't listened to every episode, how many, what is that, 2 or 3 episodes back?
Yeah.
We're planning what is going to be our next episode.
Yes.
Planning a ghost hunting expedition. And CB was one of our prime candidates of places to go. But we decided... I'm really glad you didn't say Bankhead.
We decided we're not going to CB because, interesting enough...
Really hard to get to.
CB, it was abandoned and completely sealed off very abruptly.
Just like Montauk.
It is actually very difficult to access the ruins of this town. And basically, there's only 2 known ways to access the ghost town itself. One of them is very illegal.
And it was a company town, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, that's exactly where you would do this kind of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot like Montauk.
Yeah. And it's got lots of hydroelectric infrastructure there. They got lots of juice to run whatever they want up there. Yeah.
And if you were trying to clean up your history, like, it would make sense that's how you would cover it's like shredding paper or burning documents. You make the town go away, right? You close it off. You shut down any sign that it ever existed.
Yeah.
To close off that chapter of history. Crazy.
And you know what?
That's a good one. Nice.
We're gonna
nice
be
work.
We're gonna be driving.
We're gonna be right in that area.
We're gonna be driving
tomorrow,
by there on our way to our actual target.
Fun.
I don't think we should attempt to access CB itself.
Definitely
but you know
not
what,
now.
Mike? It might. There is a turnoff. There's a road that used to lead to that town. It's all gated off now.
Yeah.
But surely we could stop just outside and do a
see
sweep.
What happens.
Do a sweep with our ghost hunting equipment.
Yeah. See if the PKG meter goes bananas.
The EMF meter?
Yeah, whatever. No, that was really good. That's really good. You're right. That was a good one. That's freaking me out a little bit.
And,
Freaking me
you
out.
know, like I said, Montauk, probably just one node in a much bigger project.
Yeah.
Who knows
Well, and
how
that
many
makes
places
yeah, that makes
out there.
that makes sense. And I do like this is really me just plucking from my memory here, but when I learned about MK Ultra stuff, I do remember that it was not just local to the United States, that other nations were involved, like Canada, like France. Again, I'm just going back through my memory here, so I don't have details prepared around that. But yeah, it would make sense. Who knows the extent of, what crimes were committed through programs like this. It's
And
really
it-
disturbing
I
to
mean,
think
it
about.
makes me it's a little upsetting to think we can hear a story like this and think about the whole Cold War mentality, and we can hear about things like Project Artichoke or MK Ultra or the Monarch Project, and we think, well, the crazy things they did in the past.
Yeah.
Well, do you really believe for a second the government, at least parts of the government, all governments, aren't doing weird projects like this
Yeah.
now?
Yeah.
They've probably gotten a lot better at hiding it,
Yeah. Yeah.
but human nature hasn't changed.
No, it
Human
makes
nature
sense.
hasn't
Yeah.
changed. There's still the enemy. There's still the other. There's still,
there's still
someone
that
out
threat.
there we can feel
Justified.
very justified about doing horrible things.
You're right. World history is littered with that activity. And yeah, our modern sensibilities, we'd like to think that we evolved or have, advanced our society past doing those things. But really, I think you're right. Human nature hasn't changed. The nature of the institutions of power haven't changed. They've just learned to hide it better. Yeah. That's probably if there's any takeaway from this, that's probably the unfortunate, most real kernel of truth to all this.
Yeah, and regardless of whether you believe, this crazy story told by Preston Nichols and Al Bielek,
And all the others, Stuart Swerdlow, that have followed after,
about the time tunnels and the psychic chair or the monster, whether you believe
and
it or not.
what I started to think as I was going through this week, finding all those crazy facets to the story, is what if all of that is in some way kind of an intentional blurring of the truth? Because you can kind of throw out the baby with the bathwater. Mm-hmm. For most people, right, they're going to hear all those crazy puzzle pieces and throw the whole thing out, write it all off as conspiracy, right? And you see that a lot in these circles where the credibility of what maybe was a root truth can be extinguished by just layering on the crazy.
Yeah.
Right? Because then it gets too absurd for people and they throw it out. Mm-hmm. The whole, right?
There was a monster at Montauk, and that monster was us.
That was terrible.
That was great.
By the way.
That was awesome.
But no, and that it's okay. My mind went there into one piece. This could be an intentional disinformation campaign to discredit the story and the stories around Montauk as conspiracy. Mm-hmm. Or my other thought is that sometimes ideas can, again, much like the monster manifesting into existence, once the idea has been implanted in people's minds and it starts to gain energy, it does take on a life of its own. And in some other energetic plane, it takes on a life and an entity and an identity of its own.
Like
right?
the Necronomicon.
Like the Necronomicon, like Loeb, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden there's an energy behind it and it becomes more and more of a real thing. Mm-hmm. And how much power does it end up becoming imbued with? Like you said, the monster, the more people interacted with it and were afraid of it, it fed off people's fear. Yeah. And that gave it, what do you call it, substance.
Yeah. And I mean, Loeb was talking about that exact same thing in our episode on Dyatlov Path.
Yeah, maybe the
myth of the Mansi, and we give these myths power.
Yeah. And the more we tell them, the more real they become, right? The more substance they have, anyway, I think you understand where we're going.
Yeah.
In circles, but I think people are understanding. I hope.
The real monster was us.
Yeah, but anyway, we're at a really good time. I think that's probably a great place to wrap it up. We are recording on Friday night. Normally we record Saturdays. Yeah. But yeah, as we kind of just briefly talked about a few minutes ago, tomorrow we are finally going and getting boots on the ground, doing field work for the first time. We're going to go ghost hunting, hopefully not be killed by this Sasquatch interdimensional monster from Montauk along the way. But yeah, so you might catch this episode a little early, but that's only because consider it a treat. Consider it a treat. We wanted to get this episode out so we had time tomorrow to work on our ghost hunt and get some on the ground.
We're going ghost busting.
Going ghost busting.
I'll be Venkman.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so with that, let's wrap it up, and we'll see everybody next week and see what we managed to come up with out in Bankhead.
Yeah.
Bankhead, Alberta, and hopefully not CB.
No CB.
Oh. All right. Have a good night, everyone. Enjoy your weekend, and good night.
Good night.